Welcome to the Michael Rivero What Really Happened radio program.
And welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, December 30th, 2020. Hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to the New Year's. And this will be our last live broadcast of the year, 2020. And being technically the end of our broadcast week, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 2. So what we're going to do, as we normally do, is a half hour of news. Then we'll open the phone lines. Then Lady Claire will come on in hour number 2 with her unique perspective on the world. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, keeping our systems working. And let's get into it. Okay, breaking news here from Nashville. The coroner has released the report on the Nashville Bomber Anthony Quinn Warner and has concluded that after blowing himself into tiny pieces, he died of COVID-19. Actually, on a more serious note here, this is very suspicious. The AT&T building was apparently reappraised to 400% of its previous value determined back in 2017. And that, I think, is very, very suspicious. Somebody's going to clean up on the insurance payout on that. And the Nashville police are trying to basically explain why, when they were given a tip about the bomber, that they didn't follow up on it. So a little bit of egg on their faces here. All righty, getting on into the political situation here. One of Trump's attorneys, Jenna Ellis, is talking about the Wisconsin Supreme Court case and says that a precedent was set in the Bush versus Gore case, saying that President Trump should be getting the same opportunity as Bush to argue his case before the court. And of course, a big problem we've had all along is the courts are simply refusing to look at the evidence. It's not a question of the evidence not holding up in court. It's not even getting through the front door here. Now, Sidney Powell is out there laying out the evidence of rampant election fraud, and she's basically saying for 5 states to stop counting on election night is absolutely unprecedented. It has never happened before. The only time votes have ever stopped being counted in the country on election night was when the Broward County problem developed over hanging chads in one county in Florida. So for 5 entire states to stop counting in the middle of the night is unprecedented. And of course, it was in the early morning hours of those nights that these huge boxes full of ballots were wheeled on in. Now, Sidney Powell is also out there pointing a finger at the Republican Party, saying that if the Republican Party hopes to survive, every Republican needs to stand up for President Trump now. And she's absolutely right. If the Republicans don't develop some spine, we are on our way to being a single-party country like the former Soviet Union. And looking at the liberal agenda, it is not going to be a pleasant experience for just about anybody here. Now, down in Georgia, you know, they're coming up on the runoffs on January 5th for the 2 Senate seats. And a federal judge, who happens to be Stacey Abrams' sister, has ordered 2 counties in Georgia to reverse course on removing thousands of individuals from the voter rolls ahead of the runoffs. The judge, Leslie Abrams Gardner, pardon me, issued the ruling Monday, concluding the counties relied on unverified change of address data to proceed with the action. So preserving all those extra little voter registrations that can be used to steal the Senate runoff as well here. Little bit of good news. The Supreme Court on Monday has basically ruled that Trump is allowed to exclude illegal aliens from the 2020 census count, leading to the apportionment of the districts for the House of Representatives. And there are a lot of districts, especially out in California, that are going to see, they may just simply vanish entirely along with their congressional seats. So that is a victory for at least getting the illegals out of the political process. All righty, now over in the Senate, They're still, this very moment, debating the $2,000 stimulus checks. Now, what's happening is the $600 checks are already going on out. If this bill passes, they'll be sending an additional $1,400, obviously. But Mitch McConnell introduced his own version of the bill that increases the stimulus checks to $2,000, but also included two other laws in there. The legislation would repeal Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which provides liability protection for the online platforms. And it will also create a committee on the Election Assistance Commission to study election integrity. Of course, they'll probably run into the same resistance that Donald Trump's Commission on Election Integrity ran up to. So it looks like McConnell is pushing for his bill to get through, and we'll see what the Senate is going to do with it. I think polls are probably showing that most Americans are insulted at the idea of just $600 assistance from the government after 9 months of lockdown, job ending, business closures. $600, it's spare change is really what it is for the government. And so the Senate may decide this has to pass, and that will definitely get in the repeal of Section 230 and at least another attempt at reforming our election system and getting it back to something that serves we the people here. Interesting little story that came out of Revolver News here, talking about how the big banks are trying to destroy the First Amendment with financial deplatforming. And we have already seen that in social media, where if you are posting videos that the powers that be don't agree with, your advertising revenues are cut off. And apparently the banks are starting to get in on the same deal right now, where if you are not officially blessed or saying the official story, you could lose your bank account. You know, PayPal's been doing that for years. They actually did it to us once some years ago here. Now, out in California, pardon me, the Gavin Newsom recall effort got a major boost. Apparently, there are individual donors pouring in tens of thousands of dollars each. And so far, they got $500,000 from an Irvine-based consulting firm. And Sequoia Capital's Douglas Leone and his wife Patricia Perkins contributed roughly $100,000. So this is becoming a well-financed move to get rid of Governor Newsom. All right, we're going to put the COVID-19 stuff into hour number 2 because Claire wants to talk about that a little bit. And so let's go right to the international news here. Brexit is finally done. The Parliament voted 521 to 73 to go ahead with the final Brexit deal. Apparently, some of the front bench Labour rebels resigned, and Diane Abbott and Jeremy Corbyn defied Keir Starmer's order to back the accord. So a lot of acrimony over there, but at least, you know, Britain is finally free from the European Union, except, of course, for the terms of the exit deal here. Over in Iraq, yesterday, 2 U.S. military convoys were targeted in the southern provinces of Iraq. One was targeted in Al-Diwaniyah, in the south of Iraq, and Al-Sumariya News reported the convoy was affiliated with the International Coalition and was targeted on the international road. Shafaq News quoted a security source as saying that a bomb had exploded in the path of the convoy, damaging one of the vehicles. Minutes after the news was reported, Sabarin News announced that another U.S. convoy had been targeted in the city of Samawa in the Muthana province. Okay, now, apparently explosives, missiles, gunfire were heard at Yemen's Aden airport during the arrival of the new unity government from Saudi Arabia, and this happened earlier today. The cabinet members, including Prime Minister Ma'in Abdullah Malik, were transferred safely to the city's presidential palace. And apparently there have been subsequent explosions and gunfire as well. So things are not really settling down there anyway. Over in the area around the South China Sea, the U.S. Navy is challenging Vietnam claims to those seas, and the USS John S. McCain conducted a freedom of navigation operation in the South China Sea last Thursday, the second such mission in a week, according to the Navy's 7th Fleet. The guided missile destroyer was sent to challenge Vietnam's excessive maritime claims in the Con Dao Islands, about 150 miles south of Ho Chi Minh City. Okay, so still a lot of tensions in the South China Sea. Over in Iran, the 3rd of January will mark the one-year anniversary of the assassination of Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad in a U.S. drone strike. Now, Iran responded to the killing by launching ballistic missiles at 2 U.S. bases in Iraq and threatened further attacks. The Pentagon was put on alert earlier this month because of the heightened risk from Iran. But apparently the Islamic Republic of Iran may not need to resort to direct military action to avenge its slain commander. Apparently, they're talking about expulsion of American forces from the region will be sufficient revenge for Soleimani's blood. So they're trying to find a non-military solution here. Now, Jonathan Pollard, who was a Navy analyst, he spied for Israel. He served 30 years in prison for spying on behalf of Israel, was allowed to fly back to Israel to a warm welcome by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's being greeted as a hero, and he did so much damage to the United States. He basically sold Israel U.S. nuclear missile launch secrets, which Israel then turned around and gave to the former Soviet Union in exchange for increased immigration quotas for Jews to come to Israel. Had a nuclear war broken out at that moment, the Soviet Union probably would have won with that inside peek at our nuclear missiles. But apparently Netanyahu met Pollard and his wife Esther as they got off the plane. Apparently Pollard kissed the ground and Netanyahu said a Hebrew prayer of thanksgiving for the liberation of prisoners. All righty, let's talk a little bit about the economic news here. It's called A Tale of Two Recessions, and it's talking about the economic toll from COVID and how it has fallen unevenly across our society. In fact, there was a story coming out earlier about how police were shutting down this salon for violating COVID restrictions, but the big box corporate-owned stores next door were wide open and full of customers. So apparently, up in Seattle, the Rainier Valley Food Bank is doing a brisk business, and they're saying they're expecting demand to actually increase going into the new year. Getting on back to Iran, they are adopting the Bitcoin for international trade. Obviously this is going to annoy the United States, which is trying to sanction Iran through the US dollar. But Iran just decided they were going to go with the Bitcoin. And this is driving Bitcoin upward. And so for those of you who invested in those, that's going to be a good thing. Another interesting development and a possible harbinger of the decline of the dollar. The New York State Department of Financial Services has authorized GMO to issue US dollar and Japanese yen-pegged stable coins. The latter will be the first of its kind available to the public. Now, to date, the regulator has given out 27 charters and licenses for companies engaged in crypto activities. they're getting into that. Little bit of good news. The Boeing 737 MAX has returned to service with the first U.S. commercial flight since the entire fleet was grounded after 2 deadly crashes in 2019. It carried 100 passengers, and I hope they weren't too nervous. But apparently it completed a trip from Miami to New York and arrived safely here. Little interesting article. This came out of sfgate.com here. People leaving Hawaii permanently doubled in 2020. And Hawaii's population has seen a dramatic decline this year with a net population loss of 8,866 fewer residents, according to the Census Bureau data. And it's one of the highest rates of population decline in the United States. So it looks like Claire and I were ahead of the trend because we got out of there to here in Indiana. All right, here's kind of a little bizarre story. The Associated Press is blaming the massive numbers of black fatal shootings, both fatal and non-fatal, across the United States on white privilege, white racism, and the COVID epidemic, but doesn't mention that the majority of the shooters happen to be black. And that's definitely, to me, that's jumping the shark, you know. But apparently the rise in these shootings across America are almost exclusively in non-white communities. But the Associated Press is out there saying it's the fault of racism and white privilege. So Associated Press meet shark, shark meet Associated Press here. Now, here is a very interesting story. Up in Boston, they have removed a statue of Abraham Lincoln that celebrated the emancipation of slaves simply because Lincoln was white. That was the rationale given for it. And it's basically a copy of the one that was in Washington, D.C. It's called the Emancipation Memorial, and it featured a freed slave kneeling before Lincoln. The bronze statue features an inscription that reads, "A race set free and the country at peace. Lincoln rests from his labors." And apparently there was a big upset over this, removing of the statue here. And I have to be very honest, I wish people were as upset over the vote fraud problem as much as they are over statues. Now, Joe Biden is still out there speechifying. He's trying to cement his image in the public mind as the incoming president. And he's out there saying that climate change will continue to threaten lives, livelihoods, and the very existence of our planet. Biden, you're absolutely wrong. Our planet's been around for billions of years. It's going to be around for billions more. We may be in trouble, but climate always changes. It always has, it always will. And the whole point of evolution is that we adapt to it. But they're going to push that whole climate gate thing to impose more government control over your life, how much fuel you can use, how far you can drive, how big a house you can live in. And to sort of put all of this in perspective, there was an article over in Zero Hedge about 10 climate alarmist predictions for 2020 that didn't exactly work on out for the global warming people. And apparently one prediction was that the average global temperature would rise by 3 degrees Celsius. It did not. They were talking about global emissions, predicting that the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere would double by 2020. That did not happen. There was concern about emissions from India and China, where they were reporting that India and China had pledged to cut their emissions by 2020. And, well, that didn't happen either. Then there was the big talk about no snow on Mount Kilimanjaro. And it was true, the snow reduced on Mount Kilimanjaro, but it had nothing to do with global warming. The forests at the base of Kilimanjaro are being logged off. And those trees were putting moisture into the air, which would flow up to the peak of Kilimanjaro and become snow. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And again, a friendly reminder that Republic Broadcasting Network, as we head into 2021, needs your continued support so that we can go on speaking truth to power and giving the public the information they need to make good choices moving forward. So once again, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. And of course, all of this information is at the top of republicbroadcasting.org, the official website for Republic Broadcasting. All right, so we're talking about all these apocalyptic climate predictions that were made for this year, 2020, that really didn't work out. And apparently one of them, back in 1986, the EPA's Jim Titus predicted that the sea level around Florida would rise 2 feet by 2020. That didn't happen. And I love this one, apparently. In March of 2000, David Viner, a senior research scientist at the Climatic Research Unit of the University of East Anglia in England, predicted that people would become unfamiliar with snow. This was actually reported in the British press. You know, future generations won't know what snow is. And then, of course, Britain got socked with this incredibly intense winter that just turned it entirely white here. Apparently, back in 2000, a Greenpeace report predicted that global warming would eradicate many of the Pacific islands, and they would be just absolutely devastated. That did not happen. In fact, we reported a story about a week ago where measurements were showing some of these islands appeared to be increasing in land mass. Back in 2004, The Guardian reported on a Department of Defense report predicting that climate change could be America's greatest national security threat, leading to global conflict and nuclear war. Well, we've got the global conflict, but it's got nothing to do with the climate, I don't think, here. In 2013, NOAA scientists predicted that the Arctic would be ice-free from 2020 to after 2040. Remember when Al Gore predicted the Arctic would be ice-free, and that didn't happen? And then the other prediction, this was from back in 2009, that the glaciers would be gone at Glacier National Park by 2020, and the glaciers are in fact still there. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines, area code 512-248-8252, and get on back to it here. We just got a couple of funny emails here. Somebody saying that if you get your $600 check for stimulus, run it through a Dominion voting machine and it will turn into $100,000. And the other one said, since Joe Biden never appears without Jill Biden really close at his side, I'd like to see him talk for 5 minutes while she drinks out of a bottle of water. I know it's an old ventriloquist trick, but it would make whatever he's spewing sound at least original, which sounds kind of funny as well. Okay. Apparently, Iran has cut the electrical power supply to Iraq on its unpaid debt. That's a little bit of a problem there. And apparently, let's see, the US dollar death is accelerating. Argentina just passed a pro-abortion bill. There are massive celebrations in the streets right now. And this next one we talked about earlier in the week here, and the subject is Disrupt Texts, and it's a movement which, according to the Wall Street Journal, is determined to eliminate racism, sexism, and hate speech from kindergarten through high school curriculums. And what they're doing is they're erasing some of history's most influential texts. things that people need to read. I mean, there are places where they're taking, like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn are now being banned. Anyway, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but apparently, now this is the official story that's coming out now. The girlfriend of the Nashville Bomber warned the police about explosives in the recreational vehicle a year ago. Apparently, the cops showed up to talk to him, but didn't bother looking in the recreational vehicle. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, the police are now trying to sort of say, well, there was really nothing that we could do, and, we're sorry, and so forth and so on. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break. And like I said, the phone lines are open. Area code 512-248-8252, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. And again, the phone lines are open. Area code 512-248-8252. And I would like people to call on in with their New Year's resolutions. This is the time of year when you have a resolution. What are you going to do for the next year? And my resolution is I'm not going to make any dumb resolutions. I have absolutely no intention of keeping, past the end of the week. You may have something else a little bit, so please feel free to call on in. Now, getting on back to some other news here. Apparently in the town of Sandy, Oregon, the mayor is calling on the small businesses to open on New Year's Day in defiance of Governor Kate Brown's coronavirus restrictions. So the revolt against the lockdowns is continuing. And as we reported yesterday, there's growing evidence the lockdowns really don't have any effect other than to wreck the economy here. Now, there's a little bit of breaking news here where apparently Senator Hawley has announced he will object to the certification of the Electoral College vote on January 6th. He's the first senator to do this. There's a lot of members of the House are going to do it, but this is key because according to the way the rules are set up, there have to be members of the House and the Senate objecting to the certification. Then it throws the whole issue open for debate and a vote in both houses of Congress. And if they can't reconcile what's going on there, then it goes to, they throw the election into the House of Representatives, one vote per state, and the Republicans have more states than anybody else here. Okay, and let's see. The control room is saying, I made the no new resolutions 3 decades ago. Absolutely. All right, we're going to go to the phones. Joe in Nome. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You freaking Howley. Anyway, I noticed the National Defense Authorization Act passed.
Yes.
And I noticed on the New York Post article saying that buried in the Senate Intelligence Act, which was merged with the NDAA, that is the language that the spooks, various agencies, NSA, CIA, FBI, NRO, et cetera, has 6 months to release information, to declassify information about threats from UAPs. I won't use that other dirty word, of course.
Okay.
And I'd like to also apologize for using a 4-letter word in my last call. But yeah, I'd like to know if you really think that the IQ test is the accurate measure of intelligence. Seriously.
No, it really isn't. I mean, intelligence is a very tenuous quality. There have been studies showing that the IQ tests themselves can have a cultural bias built in.
That's what
I'm talking cross purposes because I tested very high on my IQ tests. But, you get above a certain number and it almost becomes meaningless.
Yeah, well, you mentioned cross-cultural biases. I went to first grade in Norway. It was
Yes.
my first language.
Okay.
And I got thrown out of second grade, Catholic school.
Okay.
Now, so I'm not going to bother to even refer to what my supposed IQ is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just another Howley like you. And
Well,
I don't
do you know what
have
Howley means?
New Year's resolutions.
Do you know
except
the actual?
I don't want to.
Okay.
Huh?
I said, do you know the
I
actual
don't
meaning
wanna-
of the word Howley? It means
Meaning
without
of what?
breath. The actual meaning of Howley.
I was going to ask you that. Thank you for telling me. Without press?
Without breath, meaning that the person's word cannot be trusted.
Ah.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. It was a totally messed out freak here I met in Nome that totally stood down the cops that informed me. Well, his experiences going to school in Hawaii as a white boy.
Yes.
But anyway, okay, I'll make a New Year's resolution.
Please do.
To keep supporting you regardless of whether I agree with you.
Well, thank you. That's a very honest resolution. And I don't expect anybody to agree with me 100%. If you did, I would advise you to seek, a mental health professional immediately.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to call you a Howley anymore. Sorry.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call here. The phone lines are open, area code 512-248-8252. And again, call in with your New Year's resolutions here. Now, Alyssa Milano basically went on out trying to persuade the anti-maskers to wear their face coverings, saying that a face mask will protect you more than an AR-15 will, and got roasted on social media. So, and well, she should. It all depends on, you can't use an AR-15 to shoot the virus. But on the other hand, if you're being robbed, a mask isn't really going to do you much of any good here. And apparently Governor DeWine in Ohio is threatening to veto the self-defense law as crime skyrockets in Ohio. And crime is skyrocketing all over the country right now. It really is. And, he basically is now saying he doesn't want you to defend yourself when the criminals that are being released from prison or the Antifa mobs attack you on the streets. So again, the anti-gun agenda is definitely showing there. Apparently, 90% of the world's Airbus A380s are grounded by the pandemic. Now, this is that super jumbo jet that carries 550 passengers. It is an amazing aircraft here. But apparently only 21 out of 243 of these aircraft were still in service at the start of December. They're saying they could be grounded and out of action for years or maybe even, forever. It just may be that bad here. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones here to Joe in Tennessee. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I'm just thinking about these whole stimulus checks. I'm not going to get one. I guess it's $600, but they really should have went to 2,000. I mean, I know a lot of people that can use that, and everybody that I know that would get one, it would really help them out, because I got like stepdaughters and I got like aunts and uncles and, and $600 really, I mean, it's okay, but the fact that they're giving money for like teaching, lesbianism in Pakistan or whatever, and yet they can't take care of the American people is really sickening.
Yes,
and,
it is.
Mitch McConnell Mitch McConnell, I mean, is he purposely trying to, like, destroy the Republican Party? I mean, I know he's trying to de-Trumpify the Republican Party, but in the process of doing that, he's going to destroy the Republican Party, because I'll be honest with you, I'm never voting for another Republican again, because they're not fighting for Trump. And I'm not, you know, they're not at all. They've totally abandoned him. They're actually undercutting him. You see guys like Chris Christie. You know, he wants to get the Neapolitan the neocon nomination. You know, he's working for that, for the Republican Party. Well, I got news for you, Republicans. You're never going to win another election if you abandon Trumpism. That Trumpism, populism, was the only way you're going to win. And to have Mitch, who thinks he can go back to normal without Trump, he's going to lose the election in Georgia. He's going to be minority leader. How much power is he going to have then? I mean, I just can't believe he's so short-sighted and stupid. I mean, this stimulus check thing is a great way to help win that election in Georgia, besides doing the right thing for the American people. And he really hates Trump. The knives are out for Trump. But once again, Trump is illuminating who these people are. I mean, in some of these Republicans are making smart moves, like Marco Rubio surprised me, and Josh Hawley just, you know, he's setting himself up to be the heir to Trump. And the guy to really watch now is Pence. I think Pence is going to show his true neocon colors and stab Trump at the back. He wants to try to avoid doing it because he knows it'll destroy his political career. But deep down at the end of the road, he's an establishment player. And this is kind of it's interesting to be educated to this as far as the American people, which is, I think, what's going on right now. As far as the election and Trump staying, I don't know if he's got a card up his sleeve. I hope so. But what are you going to do? I mean, right now, he's kind of just going to sit back, powerless. I mean, I'd go to Washington, but I have all these dogs I got to watch, and you know, I can't leave them alone and tear the house apart.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
In trouble, you know. But anyway, I'll let you go so you get some other callers in there.
Well,
but
before you go, what's your New Year's resolution?
I'm going to try not to take things too seriously. You know, I think I've been taking, you know, the thing about, that's the one thing about this whole election being over, you know, I mean, not over, but it appears to be kind of coming to a grand finale. I'm going to be more fatalistic about what's coming, you know, just, I'm not happy about it, but it's real. I've gotten to the point where unless you're going to do acts of violence, we're really powerless, because you can't vote. Your vote doesn't count. They cheat. They don't listen to you. You're basically powerless. We're basically serfs, and I don't want to do acts of violence because I'm too old, and I've been in jail before. And I don't want to go back. So I'm just gonna realize that try to change the things that I can, and have the understanding of the things that I can't change. And there's really not much you can change in the world of politics. This election has shown that. You know, they're just going to cheat. It's sad. The country's basically over, you know. But once again, unless Trump can pull a card out of his, you know, a rabbit out of his hat. You know, but and I'll tell you, the biggest disaster, the biggest Benedict Arnold in the history of this country is Bill Barr. And he'll go down. I curse him. I'll curse his memory. I'll curse his children's memory. I hope his whole line is just erased from the history of the world. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, Mike. But,
all right. Well, thanks an awful lot. Thanks for the phone call. Happy New Year. We're going to switch over to Kelly in Austin. Hello, Kelly. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey there. I want to talk about liberal hypocrisy. I heard today, and I watched a little podcast on this, about Alec Baldwin's wife. Who's been claiming to be an Hispanic immigrant, and she walks around using an Hispanic accent, and what else? She was born in Massachusetts. She went to exclusive schools. She's not from Spain. This is another example of a liberal who's trying to play off of the liberal of an immigrant heritage, when in fact, her ancestors were from Spain.
Yes.
But she's not from Spain, and so she's not, in fact, an immigrant. That's like me claiming, okay, I'm of German ancestry. Okay?
Yep.
an ancestor from Germany. I'm not from Germany, so I'm not a German. I'm not a German immigrant. But this is what they do consistently, time and time again. They talk about cultural appropriation. This is another example of somebody who's living off of the cultural heritage of somebody else. They are hypocrites, and they need to be called out on it as often as possible. Anyway, my New Year's resolution is what's that?
I said that's kind of what we do here at Republic Broadcasting.
Yes. My New Year's resolution is I'm writing liberals out of my life entirely. I'm not having anything to do with them, and I'm going to work to do everything I can to make sure that if there's a Biden administration, that it comes tumbling down. I'm serious. It is time. It's time to take to the streets, and it's time to do everything we can to shake the system up and to tear it apart. If Baldwin takes office, this country will become a banana republic, and it's up to us to make sure that we do everything in the world we can to stop these SOBs in their tracks.
Absolutely.
So that's my New Year's resolution, Mike.
We're witnessing a communist revolution, a communist takeover of this country right before our very eyes. And, maybe it's because of my upbringing and the propaganda I received in grade school, but I was raised to think that, conditions were terrible in communist countries, that communism was bad. And now all of a sudden they're trying to sell it to us, and it's definitely going to be a hard sell for the older generation.
Well, Mike, I've known many people who escaped from communist countries, from Cuba, from Vietnam, from Cambodia, from Russia, while it was the Soviet Union. I lived in what was East Germany. So I have some firsthand experience with this stuff, and I can tell you, I don't know anybody. I know maybe one or two people who think that communism was a good thing. For every two people who might say that, I know probably 100 or more who will tell you something. Who will tell you something else. And I can't think of anything in the world. I can't think of anything that communism has brought to the world other than misery and oppression. And if we sit back and we allow Joe Biden and his ilk to bring that to the United States, we are asking for trouble. I'm serious. I mean, we've got to stop it now. And seriously, if it means taking to the streets and we starting to break things, burn buildings, and actually hang people, we're going to have to do it. We cannot allow these people. You cannot get along with these people. There's no way in the world that we can have any rapprochement with them and expect to live a peaceful life. They will consistently do whatever they can to subjugate you. So we've got to stop it.
Yeah, they're fanatics. They're true fanatics. They really are.
And the problem with conservatives, Mike, is that they don't know how to play mean. They don't know how to play hardball. And so the people like Mitch McConnell and these other rhinos who want to kiss and make up with the damn Democrats, we've got to overthrow them. And
Kelly,
we've got to have conservatives in office.
Kelly, I'm going to put you on hold.
Say no.
I'm going to put you on hold. Stay on the line. I'm going to bring you back after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here, and we are still talking with Kelly in Austin. And, Kelly, you had some very dark opinions of the incoming government. Would you just sort of continue where you left off?
Well, absolutely. Why do you think one of the first things on Biden's stated agenda is gun control?
Yes.
Yeah. He wants to strip us of our firearms because he wants to disarm us, and he wants to make sure that we are subject that we're going to be slaves, period.
Yeah.
And so the people who are going to have the firearms are government's thugs.
And criminals.
And of all the problems facing this government, tell me, why is it that the first thing on his agenda is gun control? The first thing I'm going to do is walk in and I'm going to sign an executive orders involving gun control. Really? Aren't there other issues that are more important, significant? And if you look across the country with issues involving guns, shouldn't you be focusing on Chicago and New York, in the areas of the country where there are gun motors, where there's gun crime? You get outside of those cities, where's the gun crime? Where is it? I'd like to know. But he wants to strip the average citizen of his right to defend himself and of his right to rebel against the government. That's exactly what he wants to do.
That's what he's most
That's
afraid
exactly
of.
why it's the first thing on his agenda.
Well, because, he knows right now that half of America think this last election was rigged, including 30% of Democrats think the election was crooked. And, I'm sure they're monitoring shows like this and websites like whatreallyhappened.com, and they're seeing all the people talking about, rising up and throwing off this government in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence. And I'm sure we've got them worried.
I know we have them worried, and I know they're monitoring everything in the world. Look, one of the reasons I got my ham radio license this year was for this very reason. I wanted to make sure that I could communicate with people in case this damn government decides it's going to shut down the internet and limit our access to information elsewhere. So I can get onto the internet, so I can get onto a ham radio, to the HF bands, or other bands, and I can communicate with people because I fully expect Joe Biden to do whatever he can trying to make sure that he limits our access to information. Yes. And I advise people elsewhere to do whatever you can to get access to radios and learn and get on ham radio, get on GMRS, get on FRS, get on the radio so that you can communicate with people, because these SOBs will do whatever they can to tie you up. They want to feed you information. They want to deny information to you.
Yes.
Good Lord. Mike, in my 69 years, I never thought I'd be this damned angry, but I'm absolutely furious.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, I've been making preparations to do things for a long time here. And I look at where I am right now compared to where I was several years ago, and I think, okay, I'm ready, willing, and able to put my life on the line. Other people here, you do the same.
All righty. Well, listen, Mark.
Are you going to lose?
Kelly, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for station ID. We got another caller waiting on the line, and then the lovely Lady Claire. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2 here. We've got one more phone call to take, and then it's going to be the lovely Lady Claire. Mark in Texas, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, just to follow up on what Joe said earlier about Bill Barr.
Yes.
His dad, Bill Barr's dad, hired Jeffrey Epstein to work as a math teacher at a exclusive prep school. I can't remember if it was in New York or Chicago. But I believe Barr was put in to negotiate the truce between the Bush Clinton crime family, and all the other crime families are fighting for the crumbs. I believe Papa Bush was probably the godfather. And, he served in all... I don't know. He served at every job imaginable.
Yes.
But I believe Bill Barr is his guy, and I even heard Bill Barr was involved in Ruby Ridge, but I can't verify that. But the second thing is the World Economic Forum is meeting either in January or February in Davos or wherever they meet. And the topic is the global reset.
Yes, we're hearing a lot of that.
Yes, and the implementation. So I believe what we're experiencing is a pump and dump, where they're just trying to get all the last dollars they can get out of our pockets here in the U.S. Maybe all over the world, I don't know. But anyway, aloha, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and can't wait to hear from the lovely Lady Claire.
Well, we're about to get to her, but before you go, what's your New Year's resolution?
To deliver more shekels to RBN.
That's a good resolution. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you for the phone call. All right, we're going to close the phone lines for a little while here, and for those of you watching on YouTube, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire with her unique perspective on the world. So take it away, lovely Lady Claire.
I think on this, the last episode of What Really Happened for the year, I want to address a feeling I have been sensing since last November's election. Now, guys, 71, okay? I have seen numerous election cycles come and go, but very few of them have been so blatantly in-your-face crooked as has this last one, between false absentee ballots and tweaking the algorithms on voting machines, both of which made me, and not a few other like-minded people, more than a little batty, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But here is what I am advocating, and I'm asking those who are listening to please think about this. What I am advocating, and particularly on the 6th of January, is not violence.
Mm-hmm.
It is peaceful demonstrations against the corruption right at the top of this government that keeps it mired in these blankety-blank endless wars. Now, what I would like to point to is a time in American history when the protests against the Vietnam War in this country ultimately changed the course of history.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, this is very important to me because I lived through that time as an older teen. And it was my first realization that my government was entirely capable of making some of the most pig-headedly, ham-fistedly stupid decisions humanly possible. And for many other of my generations, that was a wake-up call. Okay? I was beginning to see some of the ugliness which this government was perpetrating. And so many kids in my age group, young men, got drafted, and many did not come back alive or didn't come all the way back psychologically because of the intense emotional trauma participating in the war had caused. And the name for that condition was PTSD. Now, I had an acquaintance of mine, a very gifted musician who came back from Vietnam and was studying at the same college I was studying. Kid killed himself. He just could not square what he had done with his conscience. And please remember that those who profit from war have had their consciences surgically removed, okay?
Or they were born without one.
Yeah. And so at 71, I have seen strings of endless wars initiated by this country, followed by short periods of relative calm. Folks, there has to be a better way to run a country. Sorry, but there you are. The leadership in this country has morphed into war crimes are us. And Michael, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm really unhappy about being a citizen of a country that just can't seem to stay away from committing war crimes again and again.
Well, I'm not
and again.
happy about it either.
You know. And we are, folks, and I'm going to be brutally honest here, we're too old and too broke to go somewhere else. I really like that, but, you know. And sometimes this is happening in places where we don't even know that there is a U.S. military presence. Now, I looked at the numbers this morning, and are you aware that the U.S. has troops in 150 countries around the world at this moment? That number, to me, is nothing short of completely staggering.
Yes.
And the question is, why? But let's get back to Vietnam and what happened in this amazingly peaceful, nonviolent protest.
Mm-hmm.
It was a moratorium, to end the war in Vietnam. It was a massive demonstration and teach-in across the United States against the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. It took place on October 15th, 1969, followed by a month later on November 15th, 1969, by a huge moratorium march in Washington, D.C. The goals were to create peaceful mass demonstrations across the U.S. and Australia And guess what? It did work. It took a while, but it did work.
It did work.
Yeah.
Well, Lyndon Johnson wrote in his biography that when he looked out the window of the White House and saw all those people on the mall, was the day he realized that we're going to lose the war in Vietnam, which had really been started only for two reasons. One, the offshore oil assets,
Right.
and two, to enrich military contractors.
Yep.
And that's, Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. We're seeing it again right now, where they're pushing for war, so the government will take money away from us and give it to the military contractors for things that go boom.
Yeah. Now, Fred Halstead writes that it was the first time the anti-war movement reached the level of a full-fledged mass movement.
Yes.
And in 1969, millions marched in the U.S. moratorium. And Americans took part in peace initiatives across the country to protest against the continuing war in Vietnam. And when I look at the situation, for example, in Afghanistan, the war in Vietnam lasted almost just as long, almost 20 years.
Yes.
Okay. And it was estimated to involve 2 million people, and it involved towns and cities throughout the U.S. And it was working men and women, kids in school, the young, the old, took part in religious services, school seminars, street rallies, and meetings. Now, I remember living through this period in Greater Los Angeles. And my late dad's family had been Episcopalian, and there was a beautiful Gothic church called St. John's Church. I remember wanting to go back there and get a little sense of maybe what Dad got spiritually coming here. And I couldn't get in the front door. And it said, this front door is going to be locked out of shame and disgust for what's going on in Vietnam. And I thought, wow, these people really are putting their mouth where their faith was. And I thought that was a brilliant thing for them to be doing. Now, supporters of the Vietnam moratorium wore black armbands to signify their dissent, but also to pay tribute to American personnel killed in the war since 1961. The focal point was the capital, Washington, D.C., where more than 40 different activities were planned and about 250,000 demonstrators gathered to make their voices heard. And there was a statement made by Senator Edward Kennedy, very telling, right about this time, because he did go to the Boston anti-war march.
Yes.
And he said, I do believe this nation is in danger of committing itself to goals and personalities that guarantee the war's continuance. Boy, does that have a ring?
Yes,
in 2020?
Yes, it does.
Hello. Yeah. Some peace demonstrators gathered on the Capitol steps, and they sang songs and held candlelight vigils until rallies begin in the morning. Now, addressing a rally in Washington, Dr. Benjamin Spock, the child care expert, said that the war was a total abomination, that it was crippling America and needed to be stopped. Outside the White House, there were some scuffles and some arrests when police clamped down on black activists. In Portland, about 400 protesters clashed with police after an attempt to prevent conscripts entering an Army induction center. Administration supporters were, of course, critical of the moratorium. Now, Senator Wheeler, chairman of the Joint Chiefs at that time, called protesters interminably vocal youngsters, strangers alike to soap and reason. Excuse me?
Yeah, personal attack there.
Oh, yeah. Okay. In a letter to President Richard Nixon, 15 Republican congressmen called for an intensification of the campaign. Supporters of the war made those views known as well. Now, in New York, where the mayor, John Lindsay, had ordered the U.S. flag to be flown at half-mast for the day, police officers and firefighters drove with their headlights on in protest at the moratorium day, as did many ordinary citizens. Some officials wore badges that read USA, Unity, and Service for America. Now, what Senator Kennedy wanted, and he was, again, a very vocal anti-war campaigner. He called for combat troops to be withdrawn from Vietnam by October next year and all the forces by the end of 1972. And I think he was very brave to do that.
Yes, he was.
President Nixon continued to work from the White House without comment as thousands marched around him. Peace activists congregated outside U.S. embassies across Europe. In London, a crowd of some 300 people demonstrated opposite the U.S. Embassy in Grosvenor Square. Now, the Vietnam War actually started way earlier than most people think it started. It started November of 1955, I was 6, and ended officially April 30th, 1975. And again, I used to think that nearly 20 years after the conflict, that the U.S. government would never, ever again get us into an interminable, impossible to win war again in the 20th or 21st centuries. But wow, was I absolutely wrong. The continued wars against Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, they continue unabated. And what Kennedy said, like I said, that statement almost haunts me now that I look at it again. You know, the military-industrial complex loves wars because it feeds them financially. So they are very happy to have interventionists bite them at the helm forever, for however long that is going to continue. Now, folks, I'm no Mrs. Nostradamus. Wouldn't cop to it at all.
Okay.
But if I were a betting lady, I would bet that it will be very soon after the swearing in that you will see President Biden be retired one way or the other.
Well, you know, there's always the medical issue and the mental issue here. But all of a sudden, now that the election is over, the corporate media is now starting to pay attention to all of this Ukrainian corruption, Burisma.
Right on time.
They still won't talk about the videos that were found on Hunter Biden's laptop, but there may be a move to simply impeach Biden and put Kamala Harris in the Oval Office.
Yeah, I mean, the signs of early dementia are very clear
Yes, they
to
are.
anyone, you know. I've had people in my family with a little bit of that. So, yeah, I know what dealing with that is like. And that's why the DNC essentially kept him in the basement for nearly the entirety of the campaign.
Well, he stayed in the basement because he knew he didn't really need to go out and campaign because the election was going to be stolen for him.
Yeah.
Same reason Hillary didn't really do a lot of campaigning in 2016.
Yeah.
She thought it was going to be stolen for her. Boy, did we fool her.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So what I am asking you, please, okay, if you are planning to protest the election, the corruption, and the wars, et cetera, please do it peacefully. The young guy next to you advocating for the use of violence is probably a member of one of our wonderful alphabet soup agencies, desperately trying to make peaceful demonstrators look bad. Please don't let them. This is what I'm begging you to do come this new year. Now, one of the biggest issues for America, and I think the world in this coming year, will be the right to unfettered, uncensored information, even if that information's a little ugly, okay? But we desperately need to get the best information we can to make the best decisions for ourselves as human beings, and for our families, for people we care about, and this, I think, is going to be a big battle in the coming year.
It is going to be a battle. I mean, Biden has already indicated he wants to shut down the independent media.
That means
That's us.
Hello, guys.
You know, absolutely, just shut it down. And, you know, you'll get the TV news from the officially approved channels and everything. Every other source will be shut. I mean, look at what the corporate social media has been doing.
Yeah.
I mean, they were even censoring President Trump because he dared speak what the deep state did not want to have to hear. And I know that probably on the 6th, when Trump does have his big rally in Washington, D.C., he's planning on presenting all the evidence of election fraud that he's collected. And I'm willing to bet right now that the TV networks aren't going to even cover it.
Probably not.
Nope.
Probably not at
But
all.
we will. We will. Okay.
And, I mean, you look at Facebook and Google, they're just other arms of government information, okay?
Yes.
And they have the ability to shut down a lot, which is why you need us and Republic, independent media, who are going to give it to you straight, no chaser, no filter. We're just going to tell you how things have come down, and we're going to be honest, and we're going to be responsible about that.
Yes, we are.
And, the lies get a lot of big money in media.
Yep.
Telling the truth, oh, holy Hieronymus Bosch, not so much.
Yeah. We're hunting for spare change under our couch cushions these days.
Sort of, And it's very important, not only suppression of such information, to me, is a crime against humanity.
Yes.
Knowledge is power. Please, everyone who listens and watches, don't forget that. One of the most important things you can do is to educate yourself the best you can with the information you're getting. And one of the things that you look for when you're doing research is, where does the data converge?
Yes.
That's really, really important to know. So if you've got a lot of stories saying that, well, let's say XYZ supplement can help with yada, 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 and it's not just one article, but it's several, and they appear to be well vetted, you can probably say, okay, the supplement is good for preventing problems.
A lot of information out there. Anyway, we have to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back with more of the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with the lovely Lady Claire. And Lady Claire, you've got some health stories for us?
Yeah, and it has to do, again, with access to information. A couple of areas. Now, there was a study done in I've got the year wrong. In 1990. I'm sorry.
Okay, alrighty.
In Denmark, on women taking hormonal birth control. And it was reported in the New York Times, but didn't seem to get much traction after that. The study was done on 1.8 million Danish women. Now, what it found was significant. The new paper estimated that for every 100,000 women, hormone contraceptive use causes an additional 13 breast cancer cases a year. That is, for every 100,000 women using any kind of hormonal birth control, there are 68 cases of breast cancer annually, compared with 55 cases a year among non-users. While a causal link had been established between birth control pills and breast cancer years ago, this study is the first to examine the risk associated with current formulations of birth control pills and devices in a large population. And the study found that few differences in risk between the formulations. And apparently the women cannot protect themselves by turning to implants or IUD devices that release a hormone directly into the uterus. And the study also suggests that the hormone progestin, widely used in today's birth control, may be raising breast cancer risk. This is an important study because we had no idea the modern day pills compared to the old-fashioned pills in terms of breast cancer risk. And we didn't know anything about IUDs, said Dr. Marissa Weiss, an oncologist who founded the website breastcancer.org and was not involved with the studies. Now, gynecologists just sort of, blithely assumed that a lower dose of hormone meant a lower dose of risk, but that wasn't
lower risk of cancer.
Of risk of cancer.
Okay.
But the elevated risk is still there. Okay, it's small, but it's measurable. And if you add up the millions of women taking the pill, it's a significant public health concern. Now, I am wondering if any younger person who is looking at taking birth control had this conversation with their OBGYN. And I think I want to link this story to what really happened tomorrow, just so young women who are looking about getting on the pill and want to be responsible, that they have this information and can have this conversation with their doctors. And if if I were a young person or wanted to be fitted with an IUD device, wouldn't you want your gynecologist to have gone over these risks with you? Or if you were or are in love with a woman who was looking to postpone pregnancy until a more optimal and established time in their lives, wouldn't you have wanted that woman you love to have had this information before she went on oral birth control pill or an IUD? I think the short answer is heck yes.
Absolutely. But, it may be this stuff is probably not being taught in medical school.
Yeah.
But
here's the deal for me. This information messes with the narrative that birth control is completely safe and can have no negative effect on your life and future health. And I am just hoping that healthcare professionals, doctors, nurse practitioners, please, when I put this up tomorrow, all of those who are in the healing professions, take a look at it, bookmark it, print it out. It's really important because I don't think that a lot of these women got this information before getting on, an IUD or on the birth control pill.
Well, it's all about pushing product, and sometimes safety is sacrificed. I mean, women are encouraged to get a mammogram, once a year?
Yeah.
And then they finally found out that exposure to the x-rays was actually causing more breast cancer than it was detecting.
Yeah, and that's wild. I remember when I was in college and I was friends with a very lovely lady who was a little older than me. And I was asking Aida, because she and her husband had a beautiful little boy. They wanted to have another kid, but they were kind of waiting until the timing was right for them.
Mm-hmm.
And what she said to me about the way the pill works, she said, it fools your body into thinking you're pregnant, so you don't have a pregnancy.
Right.
And I remember that my first thought on that was, man, there's going to be a biological price these women are going to be paying. I didn't know the science at the time, but unfortunately that has proven true. We do have a causal relationship between cancer and birth control.
Yes, we do.
And I think also our big pharma manufacturers need to be taken to task on this. Yes, I understand. That having birth control capability is great, but somehow someone has got to have the horse sense that it's not going to kill you on the flip side of your life with breast
you don't get cancer from condoms.
No, that's that's true.
All right, we got to take another break for commercials and back with the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking with the lovely Lady Claire. And Lady Claire, what is your next story?
Well, the next story about having access to information is really important, especially to parents of teenage kids. Now, there is another very brilliantly hyped product in this country for which the class action lawsuits are starting to fly. They're going to be tumbling out of control next year. And these are regarding Gardasil shots for our teens. Now, there has been a lawsuit which claims the HPV vaccine caused the teen severe injuries. Now, this came August 19th, 2020 from Providence, Rhode Island. And apparently the national law firm of Baum, Headland, Aristi, and Goldman filed a Gardasil lawsuit against Merck on that day on behalf of a 19-year-old woman, alleging that the company misled the FDA, legislators, doctors, and moms about the safety and efficacy of the Gardasil vaccine. The lawsuit asserts Merck purposely played down the risk of Gardasil's ingredients, including a proprietary aluminum compound, a potent neurotoxin, I'd like to add, and secret and potentially hazardous DNA particles. Plaintiff Julia Belasco alleges that she suffers and continues to suffer severe and permanent physical injuries, such as autoimmune disease known as postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS, after receiving multiple jabs of the human papillomavirus Gardasil vaccine.
Yes.
Now, the national law firm that has taken her case has an incredible track record of convictions with this, and a record number of winning cases, and wouldn't have taken this case unless they thought they had a real slam dunk with this young lady. Now, Merck is being sued for, and let me get to this laundry list, It is down here, and forgive
Okay.
me, I just ran off. Okay.
Mhm.
And Merck is being, she was physically unable to attend high school, most of it. The case number is 120-CV00364. The complaint against defendants Merck and Company and subsidiary Merck, Sharp and Dome Corporation, both of New Jersey, seek damages based on the following action: negligence, strict liability, failure to warn, manufacturing defect, breach of warranty, common law fraud, violation of Rhode Island's Deceptive Trade Practices Act. The lawsuit also seeks punitive damages against Merck. Now, according to the complaint, Merck failed to properly test Gardasil before the HPV vaccine was fast-tracked. Fast-track, is that a word, Mike, that we've been
We've
hearing?
been hearing a lot of that. They've had a whole fast
Yeah,
track
yeah.
thing lately, yes.
And has been administered to millions, let me repeat that number, millions of young girls and boys throughout the U.S. and the world.
Which is kind of weird because boys don't get cervical cancer.
I know. Furthermore, Merck knew or had reason to know that the vaccine was defective and ineffective, but instead of warning the medical community and the public, the company wrongfully concealed information and further made false statements concerning the safety and the efficacy of Gardasil. Now, what loving parent in their right mind would want this kind of an outcome for their kid? The short answer is none. And Mike, what really bothers me the most about this
Mhm.
is the company is going to pay some punitive fines, et cetera, but nobody goes to prison.
Nobody goes to jail. And they'll take those fines off their taxes.
Yeah, you know, I think when someone allows a vaccine that they know to be defective, deficient, and harmful, and just signs it through, there should be prison.
I
And
would
not
absolutely
in
agree.
a club
Absolutely
fed.
agree.
The hardest time that is humanly possible, so that the executives of vaccine companies do get the idea that perhaps this was not the smartest decision they ever could have made, you know?
Yep. I understand over in Europe there have been a lot of problems with Gardasil, particularly involving narcolepsy
Yes,
episodes.
yeah.
Yeah, it's nasty, nasty stuff.
Yeah.
But again, it's all about the Benjamins here.
Yeah.
That's why they're selling these for young boys who do not get cervical cancer. They
Because-
don't have a cervix.
Yes, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. There are people who sign off on these decisions, literally sometimes getting away with murder because
Yes.
the injury is so bad. I want to see them do hard time so that this gets this gets mentioned as something that you don't do as an executive. You just
That would
don't
be
do it
nice,
anymore.
yes.
I would love to see that change
Mhm.
in the U.S. law. Personal responsibility and personal ethics are so important, and especially
Mhm.
in terms of medical care. And this, of course, very naturally leads me to our current situation, which is the topic of the COVID-19
Mhm.
vaccine, and there's a third now from AstraZeneca.
Yes,
that's
they
yeah,
just got approved.
yeah. Now, both vaccines have shown astonishing and essentially equivalent degrees of efficacy, at least in the early stages. But how they stack up over the
Well,
long term,
we're not too sure
Yeah.
about that because one of the stories I had on this
Yeah.
is that apparently there was this emergency room nurse
Mhm.
who got COVID-19 8 days after receiving the vaccine.
Yeah.
So I don't know how effective it really is. And remember, that was the same situation that we had with my doctor who
Yes.
got the vaccination and then came down with COVID.
Yeah, it was just about the same timing. So
Yeah.
I'm sitting here shaking my head. And unfortunately, this lady, her husband, and the 3 kids are down, and her grandma's down with it.
Yes.
And grandma went to the hospital yesterday, but
Yep.
she was released. Thank God, that's my mom. And she's doing much better.
Mm-hmm.
And we're probably going to do some FaceTime over the weekend with
Yes.
them and just, work.
Can't get infected through an iPad.
No, one cannot do that. That's not going to happen,
we're being told these vaccines are 91, 95% effective, but we don't really know that. It's just what we've been told about it, by the same corporate media that is failing to report the thousands and thousands of adverse reactions that have already been experienced. We're talking, not just a mild fever or cold. We're talking about adverse reactions so severe that people can't go to work. They can't do their daily routine. There have been a couple of deaths now following the vaccinations.
One in Switzerland, I believe.
And one in Israel. And I think there was one in Norway here that I had, the Switzerland, the nursing home resident. And apparently in Jerusalem, a 49-year-old came down with anaphylactic shock after getting the vaccine. And that is also something that has been reported in other patients as well.
I am not an anti-vaxxer. There are some vaccines which I think have been safe and effective. The older polio vaccines.
But the newer one is causing problems.
Oh, yes, it is. Mike, what is about the new vaccines? Have they actually caused polio in some children in India?
In Africa, actually. And the problem is it's a technology called an attenuated pathogen where they take the actual polio and they slap it around a little bit to knock it silly. Then they put it in the syringe with some adjuvants. The problem is that these attenuated pathogens can return to full potency once injected. And the World Health Organization is admitting that this Bill Gates-backed vaccine campaign is actually causing polio. For a while, they tried to call it polio-like paralysis to not have to admit there was a problem. But, it's simply happening too much.
And what I am saying about this, and I mean, my HMO calls me so rarely, I'm sort of not on top of their radar. But I want to know what the hard numbers are in my age group on adverse side effects and which vaccine seems to offer the better level of immunity. One has aborted fetal cell tissue. I have no idea what that's about. And the other
may be a mechanism to sterilize people.
Well, and the other has antifreeze.
Propylene glycol.
Propylene glycol. Now, we know that if ingested orally, propylene glycol kills people because
it does.
Some very unaware parents have sometimes left that stuff open. A toddler will want to explore, they'll want to drink it, and they die. It tastes
very sweet.
And they'll die.
And the antifreeze companies could add a bitterant to discourage that, but they haven't yet.
I think that would be, a good thing.
Yes, I do too.
Now, both have been created using manipulated DNA techniques, but the problem for me is because these vaccines have been fast-tracked so rapidly, how do they know that these small amounts of antifreeze, which is a poison when ingested, or the manipulated DNA won't have long-term negative effects for the people who were vaccinated? And the short answer
is we don't. I mean, one of the doctors that I talked to about my situation says anytime you hear the words autoimmune, you're dealing with an adverse vaccine event, and they can take years to surface.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I remember when you had pneumonia. They gave you Pneumovax.
They gave me the Pneumovax when I wasn't looking. And then all of a sudden I'm down with this polymyelitis rheumatica. Which is an autoimmune disorder that attacks the muscles and nerves. And I got a lot of nerve, thankfully.
Yes. I took the jab when my sister-in-law's an NP, and she's very balanced about nutrition and complementary things that you can do. So I tend to listen to her because she tends to have a good track record. But she told me that before you got home from the hospital that I needed to get it. I took it. No big deal. No big deal at all. But I think this is an issue.
Is that why you're falling down so much?
Balance.
Yes,
balance, dear. So I'm going to wait, I believe, for a longer developed protocol following vaccine to become available. All right.
Yeah. And again, I think back to 1976 and the swine flu vaccine campaign, where it was mandated for all American citizens to get the shot. They called it off after it was 1/4 of the way through when it became obvious the vaccine was killing more people than the flu did.
And, we've had episodes of this before. I remember in the case of Gardasil, in the boardroom, there was a story that said that Gardasil was going to be the new Vioxx, which was an anti-arthritis drug that I was on for a very little while.
Yeah.
And it just
They're
really,
being sued all over the place.
Yeah, when I'm looking at drugs, I'm looking at older drugs that have been around for a while, because I think the process and protocol, when it is followed, is really quite good.
Yeah, but in the rush for bigger profits and, with the government indemnifying the pharmaceutical manufacturers, they don't have an incentive to be as careful as they used to be.
Yeah.
They are protected from lawsuits unless it can be proven, as this previous lawsuit mentioned, that they deliberately lied to the FDA, that they, these are criminal actions, which basically can be used to get around the indemnification.
Yeah.
When you have an industry that is protected from lawsuit, whether it's pharmaceuticals or computers, you're going to get lousy products.
Yeah.
Remember Windows Millennium Edition?
Oh, ouch. I don't want to. I don't want to. Yeah. And, Mike and I were exposed about a week ago to COVID-19, very inadvertently. We took the test Sunday. Got the results back, we're negative, thank heaven.
We're both negative, which sort of supports the idea that asymptomatic transmission is not occurring with COVID-19, because when I had my appointment with my doctor, it was 2 days before she showed symptoms.
Yeah.
And being that she's also my niece, I gave her a hug on the way out of the exam room. And
we love her dearly.
Yes, we do. She's a very, very nice lady.
Yeah, she is. And, but it is scary out there. But Mike, what has happened to the regular seasonal flu?
It's all but vanished. According to the CDC, they're not even keeping count anymore. And I remember earlier in the year, they were talking about the double threat of COVID-19 and a really bad seasonal flu. But the seasonal flu, it's just not there, which raises the possibility that in the rush to inflate the COVID-19 numbers, that a lot of cases of ordinary flu are being listed as COVID-19 because there are financial incentives, for medical practitioners and clinics to have lots of COVID cases.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, But again, I want to have that information. I want the right to look at it, to dissect it, to figure out what I'm looking at, and to make an informed, intelligent decision. When information is suppressed, you can't do it because you don't have it.
You don't have, and the corporate media tries to suppress the negative information. We've talked before about the Fox News synthetic bovine growth hormone lawsuit. Where these two reporters were told to report on this product from Monsanto. They found it had serious problems for the people who were eating the meat and dairy products from the treated cows. And Fox News said, no, you can't report that. You have to make Monsanto look good. And the Fox News fired the reporters. They sued and they lost when the court said there actually is no law that the news media has to tell anybody the truth about anything, which is all you need to know about corporate media.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. They can and they will lie to you.
Absolutely.
To push an agenda.
Yep.
And we're getting a lot of agendas pushed at us right now in terms of more and more and more war.
Yeah, I'm approaching agenda burnout.
Yeah, I am too.
Yep.
And I wish one of Joe Biden's New Year's resolutions, if in fact he is sworn in on the 20th, and that particular dance may not be quite over yet.
Well, I hope you're right here, but
I know.
The entire deep state mechanism, Democrats, even some Republicans, the corporate media, the court system, they're all against Trump and they're all pushing Biden in there. And Biden is going to get us into a world war, or whoever's pulling his strings.
Yeah.
Maybe Jill Biden with her hand up Joe's back, flapping his mouth there.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
What kind of bets do you have as to how long Joe Biden is going to last as president?
I would say probably 2 to 3 months at most.
That long.
That long. And then he'll say, for medical reasons, dementia, I'm having to step down. Or they will fan up this Burisma Ukraine corruption scandal, and he'll be impeached. And Kamala Harris will be the nation's president, and she's ultra left-wing warmongering person. Okay, we're going to take another break for commercial. We'll be back with the last segment of our show after these few words. Welcome back to our show here, last segment of our last program for the year 2020. And Claire, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, I'd like to discuss this with you, honey. I'm feeling right now in this country that the center may not hold.
I'm in agreement with you. I mean, I've never seen our society so polarized.
Yeah. There might be a balkanization of this country. I would hate to see that happen. But I know that there are people in positions of financial and political power advocating for more war. But that's not going to save this country.
No, it isn't. It's bankrupting the nation.
You know, we don't have the troop strength. We don't have the weaponry, the money, or the manufacturing. Now, I can't tell you what some of the conversations are going to be with the new government after the 20th of next month. But I will tell you one conversation I'd almost bet is going to be happening at the highest levels of military, industrial, and civilian power. And that conversation, in order to further our abilities for these wars, will be about a return to the draft. And this time, the legislation is already there to support this. They're not only going to be coming after you young men, they're going to be coming after your daughters as well. So
yes.
Think about that.
Thank you, feminists.
Well, you know, feminism as an equity feminist, that kind of feminism is not a problem.
But gender feminism certainly is.
You know, maybe the same, you're going to pay a guy to do the job. I'm fine with it.
No, I had no problem with that. I was an early supporter of the feminist movement when it was about equity feminism. And then when it got into this male bash, all men are rapists kind of mindset, I sort of drifted away. Actually, I ran. But,
who was the name of the lady who stole feminism? That wonderful book.
Kathleen Kroll.
Yes. If you ever have a chance, please pick up this book and read it. It's a very interesting observation on the history. But Mike, would you agree with me that we're already kind of in a wartime economy?
We have been in a wartime economy for quite a while. I mean, look at how much they just spent, for the National Defense Authorization Act. And
obscene.
You realize that just 3% of America's military spending could end starvation around the world. I mean, that's the volume of cash. And we're getting junk for it, like the F-35 and the Gerald R. Ford and the Zumwalt stealth destroyer. And it's just huge holes that money is poured into. And it's our money. And especially right now with the COVID lockdowns having wrecked our economy, it's going to be a long time building our nation back up. And we need the government to be taking care of the American people and quit sending our money to all these countries around the world to basically bribe their leaders, to do what the U.S. government wants them to do.
And I mean, inflation is horrible.
Yes, it is.
I mean, coming from Oahu to Indiana, my jaw drops when we're at the local grocery store.
The cost of living here is just so much better. It really is. It really is. And there's the music here. There's the music. It's time for us to say goodbye for 2020.
Happy New Year.
It's been a real armpit of a year. So please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. His guest is going to be Roger Landry. Spread the word of Republic Broadcasting. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. It is very important. We'll see you next year. Aloha, America.